In this video, I'm going to share the top 10 mistakes that travelers make in other countries. Mistake number 1 is going to be not understanding the transportation situation. Understanding how to get around most efficiently might be one of the most important factors to ensuring a fun trip. Some places public transit is amazing, and some places it's not. In Hong Kong, I went for 2 whole weeks without ever using a single taxi or Uber. When I was in Peru, however, I remember a 40-minute Uber ride was $3, so why even bother with messing with the complicated public transit system? The best way to figure out your local transportation system is to ask locals. Ask the concierge at your hotel or the server at your restaurant. They live there, they know best. My brother and I's worst example of not understanding the transportation system was while we were in Italy. We were trying to get from one side of Rome to the other, from the more historical district to Trastevere, which is more residential. We searched on Google, found the optimal route Google said to go, and we booked our train tickets. Problem was, we got on this train and there was like sleeper beds. It was a train for, going across the continent of Europe. Not what we wanted to do. We did end up getting to the right spot, but we found out that we could have just taken a 10-minute bus ride rather than going on this 40-minute train ride that looped all the way around the outskirts of Rome. Another note on understanding the transportation system is ask the concierge at your hotel how much a trip to and from the airport should cost. Sometimes taxis do have to pay a bit of a tax, so it can seem outlandish what they're charging, but you just don't want to get scammed. That leads me right into mistake number 2, which is going to be relying on Google over local advice. This one's pretty self-explanatory. Google is a great resource some places, and some places it's just terrible. Be wary of Google reviews on restaurants, as they're left mostly by tourists, and sometimes the tourists just don't understand how the system works. In Europe, for example, you find a lot of bad reviews on restaurants saying that the server didn't bring them a bill. That's because in America, it's considered rude if you have to wait on the server to bring you a bill. We want things to be prompt. But in Europe, it's actually the opposite. It's rude if a server shoves a check in your face because it's considered that, they're trying to rush you out of the restaurant. So you just have to be wary of these Google reviews because sometimes they're a little inaccurate to how good the restaurant actually is. My advice, as always, ask locals. Ask locals everything. Just they know where to eat, they know how to use public transit, and they'll know the best app to use. Sometimes Google is the best app to use for navigating, but locals will know. When I was in Colombia, for example, no one used Google Maps. All they used was Waze. So that's just something you're not going to know unless you ask around. The third mistake you don't want to make is bringing up unsavory topics. Now, what do I mean by bringing up unsavory topics? When traveling in other countries, there's a few basic topics you almost never want to bring up. The first is going to be politics. In America, we treat politics as entertainment. We make jokes, memes. The news to us is who tweeted what. In other countries, this is not the case. Politics are treated very seriously, and moreover, as a foreigner, you have no right to speak well or speak ill of the country's political situation. The next topic you should never bring up in another country is tragic historical events. Another one that's pretty self-explanatory, but you see it all the time. People in Colombia bring up Pablo Escobar. Tourists traveling to the States bring up mass shootings. Tourists in Europe bring up World War II. Of course, you want to learn about the important historical events, but just remember there's a time and a place. I find it best not to initiate those conversations. The last topic you don't want to bring up in casual conversation while abroad are points of religious contention. There are so many points that major world religions agree on. Why bring up the petty differences? You're not going to convert anybody by arguing with them. You're just going to make a fool of yourself. Obviously, you can't expect to be in another country for long without getting into a conversation about politics, history, or religion. My advice is just to avoid being the one who brings up these conversations initially. Also, go into these conversations like you go into travel. You're there to learn and listen. You're not there to condemn or convert anyone. Mistake number 4 is going to be assuming everyone speaks English. While English is the most widely spoken language worldwide, that does not mean it's the preferred language in most countries. You might be asking, but what if I only speak English, Luke? How am I supposed to get around? My advice in that case is twofold. Firstly, before you travel to another country, learn the words in their language for please, thank you, and bathroom. You will be amazed how well you can communicate just by using those 3 words, pointing with your hands, and counting on your fingers. Secondly, just try to speak the local language. Trying to speak the native language, even if you're terrible at it, shows reverence for the culture you're in. If you just make an attempt at the native language, most locals will be happy to help you and will often switch to English to do so. On the other hand, if you approach everyone in another country with the entitled expectation that they're going to immediately speak English to you, you can expect to be totally dismissed. Mistake number 5, and I preach on this one on the channel all the time, is not wearing a fanny pack. So one of the most expensive mistakes you can make while traveling abroad is having your phone, wallet, or passport stolen. In most touristy areas around the world, pickpocketing is extremely prevalent. Having things in your pocket, as they would say in Colombia, is dando la papaya, or in other words, you're asking for it. You might think you're fine because your pockets are deep or you have your hands in your pockets, but trust me, pickpockets are professionals. They have so many tricks they can use to get your hand out of your pocket and steal your stuff. Wearing a fanny pack across your chest and putting your belongings in there just gives you another layer of protection against pickpockets. I feel very strongly about this one because my brother had his phone stolen while we were in Peru, and it could have all been avoided if we were just wearing a fanny pack. How they actually got his hand out of his pocket was interesting. We were walking in a market and we had our hands in our pockets because we knew that there would be a lot of pickpockets. They came up and sprinkled flour in the back of his hair. So when he took his hand out of his pocket to itch his head, stole his phone. So that just shows one of the many tricks that they have to get your phone out of your pocket. Mistake number 6 is not eating local. The great Anthony Bourdain said, don't be afraid to have a bad meal. If you never risk the bad meal, you'll never get the magical one. And I couldn't agree with this philosophy more. I've eaten plenty of terrible meals abroad, but I assure you that the ones that I've had are great, make up for them tenfold. You should approach eating local and travel in general with the mentality, as I always say, of it'll either be great or it'll be a great story. Like I said previously, never hurts to ask a local. They know where to eat. Don't be afraid to take the risk of eating local. The 7th mistake is going to be overpacking. Now, I could make a whole video about overpacking, and I probably will at some point. The 3 basic rules I like to follow to avoid overpacking are as follows. Number 1, don't pack things you don't need, except in some cases travel documents and a first aid kit. Number 2, don't pack 2 things that do the exact same thing. I'm not going to pack 2 pairs of blue jeans that are the exact same pair of blue jeans. I'm not going to pack 2 black pairs of basketball shorts. I'm not going to pack 2 pairs of sneakers. Those are just space wasters. They're going to fill up your pack. They're not going to do you any good. Once you follow the first 2 steps, what you want to do is pack things that accomplish multiple things. So I have, for example, I have a beanie that has a headlamp in it. Now I don't have to bring a headlamp and a beanie. I can just bring that. But like I said, I might make a whole video about that, but just be wary of overpacking. Mistake number 8 is going to be overplanning. I know a lot of first-time travelers love to use a travel itinerary. Here's my issue with those. You have 3 big problems. 1, you don't know how long activities are going to take. So if you have this week-long checkerboard, perfectly color-coded itinerary, and then one activity that was supposed to take an hour takes 2, now your schedule's completely messed up. Also, you don't know how tired you're going to be. At the end of some days, you might have 3 more activities planned on the itinerary, and you're just gassed. You just want to stay in the hostel or the hotel. And I think you should budget in some time to do that. And 3, most of the time when you're reserving activities, they don't really need to be reserved. Like, for example, when I went to Peru, all we reserved the entire time there was tickets for Machu Picchu. That was the only thing that had a chance of selling out. Everything else, we could just kind of show up and enjoy it when we want to. So I wouldn't worry too much about things getting booked out unless it's a major, world wonder or a sporting event or something of that sort. All right, coming to the end here. Number 9, worrying about adhering to every cultural norm. I know I've given you a lot of things not to do, but I really don't want you to worry too much when you're traveling. Traveling is supposed to be fun, and of course you're going to make mistakes. That's part of the fun. Approach travel as an opportunity to make mistakes and make some great stories. I tell my friends all the time, when I'm traveling, I often don't even remember the big things, the Machu Picchus, the Rainbow Mountains, the Vaticans, all that. I remember the 6-hour bus ride that I took with my brother, just the time I spent with the people I enjoyed. So don't worry about every cultural norm. You're going to mess up. It's going to happen. Number 10, last mistake you want to avoid is not having a rough idea of your on-the-ground spending. I covered this in my video last week on how to travel the world for cheap. You don't have to adhere to a budget every single day, but you need to have a rough idea of how much you want to be spending. This is a mistake I have made more times than I would care to admit. But like I said, that's part of the fun. We make mistakes. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you subscribed, I would greatly appreciate it as I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers by my birthday. Thank you guys as always, and you'll have a great day.